Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Snack Pack. We just got a update from the NTSB on the deadly midair crash that happened back in January between the Black Hawk and the PSA airline CRJ. If you haven't tuned in before, I'm a Black Hawk instructor pilot and also an airplane instructor pilot, and I've been trying to give some clarity as to what this means. Trying to decode some of what the NTSB has been telling us. A lot of the information is got some pilot jargon in there, and I just want to help you kind of decode what's happening. So we just got an update, and we'll just listen to Ms. Homendy here. She's the one who's she's the head chair of the NTSB, and she's been giving us some updates. So we'll listen to a little bit of this.
A critical safety issue must be addressed without delay.
Now, what she's about to tell us is about a critical safety issue that they've identified. And essentially, there have been a lot of TCAS reports, right? That's the Traffic Collision and Advisory System on the airliners, right? And there have been a lot of reports. Now, sometimes it gives them a resolution advisory. And I have very limited experience with this, but I did it in a 737 simulator. And essentially, it'll just display a big warning on their pilot display, like, hey, you need to pull up or push down or whatever. And it's basically it's letting them know there's other traffic that you may be on a collision course with, and it gives them an advisory of what to do about it, right? And how to avoid the collision so that there's not really a whole lot of thinking that needs to be involved. The pilots can respond really, really fast. So she's talking about how there's been quite a few of these, and there's some alarming statistics that she's about to tell us here.
For this investigation, we're reviewing airport operations and prior incidents, including near mid-air collision events. Information gathered from voluntary safety reporting programs and the FAA regarding encounters.
Now, voluntary reporting system, this is something that people might know as the ASAP reporting system, all right? And this is where pilots can voluntarily give information about safety hazards that they experience, and anything that they deem unsafe, they can put reports up to a system for the FAA to review.
Between helicopters and commercial aircraft near DCA show that from 2011 through 2024, a vast majority of reported events occurred on approach to landing. Initial analysis found that at least one traffic alert and collision avoidance system, or TCAS, resolution advisory was triggered per month from 2011 through 2024 at DCA due to proximity to a helicopter. TCAS resolution advisories, or RAs, unlike traffic advisories, or TAs, are recommended escape maneuvers, for example, climb or descend, level off. Keep in mind that a TA is issued when the intruding aircraft is about 20 seconds from the closest point of approach, or 0.3 nautical miles, whichever occurs first. They are advisory. RAs indicate a collision threat and require immediate action. In over half of the encounters we reviewed, again from 2011 through 2024, the helicopter may have been above the route altitude restriction. 2/3 of the
Okay, so that's pretty staggering. All right, so there have been a lot of people blaming the helicopter crew on here, and the sole fact that they were above the route restriction is like the cause of this accident. And again, it may have been a contributing factor, but apparently this is not the first time that's happened. All right, now why is this happening? I don't know. Is it complacency? Is there a altimeter error? Or there could be any number of things, right? Maybe there's some kind of obstruction over in that vicinity I'm not aware of that people try to avoid, but this is a regular occurrence, and it's not just restricted to military helicopters, right? This could be police helicopters, other government helicopters, right? But this is like a regular thing, apparently, that helicopters on this route have been exceeding that 200-foot restriction that we discussed in prior videos.
The events occurred at night. We then reviewed commercial operations at DCA and found that between October 2021 and December 2024, there were a total of 944,179 commercial operations at DCA. These are instrument flight rules or IFR departures or arrivals.
Okay, so she's talking about there's almost 1 million commercial operations here, right? Arrivals and departures. When she says IFR instrument flight rules, that means that the pilots, until they get close to the ground, or if they're on departure, as soon as they leave the ground and get a little bit up in the air, right? Like not very far, the pilots switch into inside and focusing on their instruments, right? So just imagine driving your car and you were only looking at your dash with your speedometer and and like trying to drive, right? You would instantly crash. But there are very advanced systems in these aircraft, and since we're dealing in three-dimensional space, they can fly only using those instruments, right, and not having to look outside at all. And that's why when you take off and you fly through the clouds, the pilots can't see anything outside. They're in a cloud, right? They can't see where they're going. So they rely on the instruments. And in order to fly an instrument flight rules flight route, you have to have a plan that's been submitted to air traffic control, and you have to be rated to do so, right? But all of your commercial airline pilots are IFR rated, right? So this is very normal. And then when they get close to the runway, right, then they're going to come outside and look out and actually land it visually, right? But these instruments allow them to descend pretty low as maybe 100 feet or sometimes lower above the runway without seeing anything, and they'll be perfectly aligned and then ready to land. And as soon as they we call it breaking out of the clouds, as soon as you break out and you can see visually, oh cool, hey, there's the runway, all right, let's just land, right? And then they're flying visually at that point, or VFR.
Again, that number is 944,179 commercial operations at
So like
DCA.
1 million.
During
over a
that
few
time,
years.
again, October 2021 through December 2024, there were 15,214 occurrences or close proximity events between commercial airplanes and helicopters in which there was a lateral separation distance of less than 1 nautical mile and vertical separation of less than 400 feet.
Okay, so that's pretty significant. All right, if aircraft are getting that close to each other on a regular basis, like that's not a good thing. All right, now I'll tell you the heliport where I fly out of, I'm regularly that close to other aircraft, so we're talking about 400 feet of separation. We have a corridor structure, and sometimes there will be another helicopter coming right towards me that's 200 feet above me. I make contact with them and I say, hey, what's up? You see me over here? I'm going to stay out your left door. Right after that, yeah, we got you. And then we'll pass like very close proximity to each other. And it's not exactly a big deal, all right? But in an area like DCA where you have this massive volume of traffic, things can get confusing really quick, right? Especially if you have a lot of occurrences of that. So she said about 15,000 out of like 940 something thousand flights, about 15,000 of those, that's like a little over 1%, 1.5% of them, there have been these close passings, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it was like a near miss or anything. A lot of the times they may have been, a visual of each other and like, hey, okay, yeah, I know we're going to get a little close, but we can see you and it's not a problem. So we don't know. There's still a lot more context needed to really decipher that. But there's a lot of stuff going on at this airport. So a lot of people who fly in there say this was a disaster waiting to happen. So, we'll see.
85 recorded events that involved a lateral separation of less than 1,500 feet and vertical separation of less than 200 feet.
Now that is a bit alarming. Okay, if we look on ForeFlight, this is where the accident happened right here, and this is the helicopter chart. And they keep talking about how the helicopter was on Route 1 going to Route 4, and then the PSA airliner came from the southeast and came into land runway 33 here. So I can actually turn this on, and you can see this is runway 33 right here. All right, and then so when they say 1,500 feet of lateral separation, I mean, from here, the threshold of runway 33 to about this bank is approximately a mile, right? I think I have that right. And, so just take 1,500 feet out of that. It's like a fourth of that. That's not very far. And they're talking about 200 feet of vertical separation between the two of them. Like, like in that 85 times in like 3 years that happened between a helicopter and an airplane. So this was just an incredibly busy area, and like I said, a lot of my friends who fly around there say this is like incredibly dense airspace and not really a great practice.
On the chart to my right is a cross-section of the airspace that extends from runway 33's center line, spanning from the runway to the east bank of the Potomac River.
Now you can watch what she says here, but basically what she's telling you is what I showed you in a previous video, and I'll see if I can link to it above me right here. I'll put a little link to it. But when the helicopters are on this route, right, the maximum altitude they're supposed to be at is 200 feet, as indicated right here. But the aircraft that are on approach to 3-3, well, they're constantly descending, so there's a glide slope, and at some point they're going to intersect. She also says and confirms for like a third time that there's no lateral boundaries of this route. So while typically they're supposed to stay kind of, you know, right on the little blue shaded area, they could be further west, and there's nothing preventing them from doing that, right? There's nothing illegal about it. So even if they're right on the route, what she's going to tell us here is there's 75 feet of separation between an aircraft on this route and another aircraft on approach for runway 33. That's insane. 75 feet is absolutely insane.
The figure shows the separation distance that would exist according to FAA charts, with a helicopter on Route 4 and an airplane descending on the glide slope to runway 33. As stated in my last press conference and confirmed by the FAA, helicopter routes established by the FAA have no lateral boundaries. And the region right here represents an approximation of the area in which helicopters could be flown.
Now, I want you to see where it says PAPI guided approach to runway 33. So if you watch that video, I was showing you how the PAPI works. That's a precision approach path indicator. So whereas a pilot on final might stay in their instruments until they get to, you know, maybe 200 feet or whatever the specific approach calls for, there should be a pilot outside who's trying to get visual of the runway, and eventually they're going to get visual of the PAPI. Now, on a clear blue 22 night like it was in this accident, they'd just be able to see the PAPI from like miles away. And the PAPI is 4 lights on usually the left side of the runway, and they can be either white or red, right? So if they're all 4 of them are white, that means you're above this glide slope, right? That means you'd be above where you're supposed to be. But if all 4 of them are red, that means you'd be below the glide slope, all right? The ideal glide slope is 2 white and 2 red, and each light has each color of light. They're just kind of angled a little bit different, so when you come and intersect it, you should see 2 white, 2 red lights. That means you're right on the glide slope, and then you can monitor that. You're going 2 white, 2 red. Oh, shoot, now we're 3 red, 1 white. That means, ooh, we dip below the glide slope a little bit. Let's pull up a little bit and get back on the appropriate glide slope. So if they were right on the glide slope, then, and the helicopter was right on their route following that eastern bank, there would at best case be 75 feet of separation. Now, if they were a little bit below the PAPI, right, which is totally common, right? You might be 3 red, 1 white, indicating you're slightly below glide slope. Now we're less than 75, all right? And then in their last update, they did say that the helicopter was about 78 feet too high. But regardless, I mean, what you're looking at here, now let's come over to the west a little bit. And what they're saying, what she says when it comes to the west is that the helicopter was maybe over here, a little bit left of the actual depicted line. Now, even if they were at 200 feet, they might be right in line with that approach path, you know. So it's just a really bad practice overall, I think.
We know that the helicopter on the accident date was not in this area. It was to the west.
There we go. It's like we said.
But at the maximum altitude here of just 200 feet, a helicopter operating over the eastern shoreline of the Potomac River would have just 75 feet of vertical separation.
So I talked about this weeks ago, right? And I even got in Microsoft Flight Simulator and made a simulation so you could see what it looks like. So check out that video. Put the link here one more time. And you'll be able to see exactly what we're talking about here. She goes on to discuss a number of other things and then took some questions. Main thing, they talked about air traffic control, and some people asked about questions, and I think she said that the person who was doing clearance delivery was doing double duty as something else. Whoever does clearance delivery, basically when you're about to go take an IFR flight or even departing out of a Class Bravo airspace like DCA, you have to get a clearance, right? Smaller airports, you don't have to get a clearance to even taxi to the runway, you know, but they want to give you clearance, so they are basically going to come up with a plan for you to depart the airspace, right? or enter it if you're coming in on approach. But clearance delivery specifically, before you even taxi, like ground taxi to the runway, they're like, okay, let's come up with a plan for you. All right, I want you to, when you depart, you're going to fly runway heading, and you're going to stay below 3,000 feet until we tell you to contact the departure controller, right? Pass you off to the next person. So the person who does clearance delivery, sometimes on smaller airports than this, they might also be doing ground control. So when I call ground control and I say, hey, I'm in parking, I'd like a taxi to the runway, they're like, okay, roger that, follow taxiway Bravo and then Juliet and line up and wait or whatever, or hold short of the runway. So it's not uncommon for controllers to be doing multiple duties in those towers, right? It happens all the time. So I know there's a lot of questions right now about air traffic control and manning and all this stuff, and there's a lot of like politics about it. But the truth of the matter is, in the real world, a lot of times these controllers do pull double duty. They'll be doing multiple roles simultaneously, and Ms. Hamidi here says that's not abnormal at all. Let's continue listening.
From an airplane approaching runway 3, the potential to increase risk by adding to controller workload. So we are also recommending that the FAA designate an alternative helicopter route that can be used to facilitate travel between Haynes Point and the Wilson Bridge.
So Haynes Point and the Wilson Bridge, right? This was the area in question, and Haynes Point is actually right here, and then Wilson Bridge is down here, right? So what the NTSB, today they've made an immediate recommendation to the FAA to not allow helicopters to fly on this route while runway 33 or 15 are in operation. So when she says runway 33 and runway 15, it sounds like she's talking about two different runways. It's actually the same runway. So just think about cardinal directions here, all right? And then if I'm at 360 here and I come all the way to the right, that's going to be 090 and then 180. So 330 is the heading of runway 33. Well, the reciprocal of that is 150, right? So she's saying anytime anyone's landing on this specific runway on either direction, right, either 33 or 15, that the NTSB has concluded they think it's not advisable and should immediately not allow any helicopters to be on Route 1 or Route 4 between Haynes Point and the Wilson Bridge. Right. So that's what, and I would guess that the FAA is going to do that immediately. These routes have been shut down. They've been NOTAM'd out, and what's called a notice to airmen, and we have to look at those every day before we fly. I'm about to go fly in a minute. I'm going to have to go check all the NOTAMs, right, and make sure there's nothing new that came out for my area of operation that I need to be aware of. But right now, those routes are NOTAM'd out, and then I assume the FAA is going to go ahead and take their recommendations. Now, here's the big thing. If you're scared to fly, you got to hear what she says at the end. You can watch her video for yourself in the NTSB update where she discusses how it's still very, very safe to fly. All right. There's no additional risk, right? She says the biggest risk is actually getting in your car and driving to the airport. And she herself has said that she's flown out of DCA with her daughter on a CRJ 700 operated by PSA Airlines. All right. So trust me, I know there's been a lot of stuff in the news. There was just a small plane that crashed the other day. And there's been, a couple crashes. Believe it or not, small general aviation accidents happen with frequency. They don't make headline news because there hasn't historically been like such a tragic accident that happened over the Potomac here, right? And since that happened, now anytime there's a plane crash, the media goes crazy about it, right? But small general aviation airplanes are frequently crash a lot more frequently than commercial airlines, right? Let's put it that way. And that's for numerous reasons, all right? You got a lot more experience in these cockpits and the commercial airliners. They have a lot more safety features versus small little engines. Sometimes a lot of times they only have one engine, right? The planes that I fly at the flight school I teach for on the civilian side, they just have one engine. So if that engine goes out, well, now I'm a glider. All right, now I got to figure out how to get down. And it's not exactly easy to do that and find a good place and really, hit that landing right on the money. In fact, you don't really do a whole lot of training. You don't get tested on your specific ability to land on a specific point during an engine failure until you get to the commercial level. So private pilots, they don't even have to do that, right? Now you do have to I guess there is sort of a test to make sure you can, um, yeah, in the event of an engine failure, a total engine failure, make it down to a specific point, but you don't actually do it. You know, the examiner will turn your engine off, right? It'll just pull the power back and then say, okay, what are you going to do? And you follow your procedure, and then you say, oh, I've got a field down here. I think I can make that field. And then before you get to 500 feet above the ground, they'll be like, okay, recover. Let's go do the next maneuver or whatever. Once you get on a commercial level check ride, then you actually have to do it. They pull the engine off, they pull the throttle back, and it's like you got to land right at this specific spot on the runway, or you fail. So so if you're flying with just somebody who has a private pilot license, may not have had to do that level of intricacy. But that's just one thing. Engine failures, those happen a lot. And in the case of the accident that happened the other day in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, a door opened up. It was a small Beechcraft Bonanza, and the door opened up on the pilot, I think on takeoff. And not really sure what happened there. It sounds like they were panicking and maybe got distracted or something, and then ended up crashing, which was. But again, don't be afraid to fly. There's like millions of flights that go on every year without any incident, and every now and then something bad happens. But it's just the nature of the beast. And like the NTSB chair said, you have a higher chance of something happening on your way to the airport than actually on the plane. So it's just that we're humans, and humans innately have a fear of heights, right? Whether you think you do or not, everybody has a fear of falling out of the sky, right? So it's just one of those things that makes you human. So hey, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's been watching these videos. If you didn't see, I said I was going to donate all of the proceeds from ad revenue the channel brought in January and February to the Brotalion Blue Skies Foundation fundraiser for Pat 25, and I did that on a video I released last week. It's over $2,000, which is awesome. All right, and so I'm going to commit to the month of March. I'm going to give another 10% of the proceeds from this channel. I've got some other videos that are doing different flight simulator things, not related to this. So we'll do another 10% of the channel revenue from March is going to go to that same foundation. Now, I've got links in the description for that and the GoFundMe for all the families of the victims of this that were on board the CRJ accident. So please continue to give as able to those charities. And thanks for watching. Snack Pack out.